Good evening, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council. My name is Jeff Hunt, and on behalf of Hao-Ming Chen, Yogi Sabanoff, Xiao Chen, and Malcolm McGregor, and the rest of our colleagues at Rocky Solutions, we'd like to thank you for having us here tonight. We're going to be presenting to you a new vision of the City of Boulder that we're calling Boulder 2.0. In order to upgrade the city, we're going to be trying to convince you to install a community-owned fiber broadband network. So initially, Boulder should install and operate its own broadband network. In order to do so, you will need to circumvent some state legislation against this kind of network. You will also need to continue in your efforts to transition your private utility into a public utility, but you can go ahead and begin construction now and take steps to construct your network now. So an outline of our presentation. First, we'll explain what fiber is and why you should be moving forward with this project. Then we're going to look at Boulder and why Boulder is a special place that is ripe for this kind of innovation. We're going to assess you in 4 categories. 2 that we think are particularly advantageous to Boulder, and 2 where we think you face challenges, namely the state law and the utility that I mentioned before. And we'll leave you tonight with some concrete strategies and steps for how to move forward with this implementation.
So why should we have fiber optic network? The fiber optic network is the fastest way to connect to the internet, which is 200 times faster than the cable. You may know Google Fiber in Kansas City. It is right now much more feasible and cheaper to the mass. The fiber can bring a lot of benefit to our society. With the fiber, our children will get to YouTube at a faster speed. They will also get faster internet and accelerate learning in school. Our doctor can communicate with their patients and other professionals more efficiently. And also, our local government is able to monitor its smart grid to deliver better services for public safety, transportation, and public works. Boulder is already a high-tech city. Fiber network will bring more benefit to Boulder and transforms it to a smart city. Fiber optic will attract more businesses and create more jobs in local communities. It will also make current local business more profitable.
If fiber is so great and consumers seem to benefit from it, you might wonder why wouldn't a private operator build it and operate it? And the reason is twofold. First of all, cable is a natural monopoly, and with high upfront costs, they take a couple of years to repay. Secondly, the existing regulations don't require the cable providers to share that network. So what happens, the 1 or 2 networks that lay the cable have no incentive to share and no incentive to upgrade it, effectively becoming a local monopoly. So consumers are stuck with high prices and slow speeds. But we believe that Boulder should not be stuck in this situation. Communities around the country are building the fiber network on their own and then opening it up for other providers. This results in greater competition, better prices, and faster speeds.
Okay, now you might want to ask why Boulder should be the place to do this. Actually, Boulder has a right size of population. For big cities, big cities usually faces more obstacles, and for small cities, their kind of lack of sufficient resources to start this project. Boulder is really special because it's a mix of right citizen base, high-tech industry base, and also very vibrant cultures. These facts together actually make it feasible to bring the fiber broadband a reality in Boulder. Currently, you have 2 advantages, but you also face 2 challenges. First of all, Boulder really scores good on public support. Mainly democratic-based political evolution and a relatively young population structure make citizens to be more supportive and enthusiastic about technological innovation. There are also a couple of universities and a lot of science research institutes in Boulder. Frequent educational activities and science research also generate a relatively high demand for very fast fiber network. Also, local business community will be a big supporter of this project. First of all, Boulder owns a lot of high-tech industry and a lot of defense contractors. Secondly, Boulder is recognized as a national VC hub with a reputation as the top 3 destination for startups. Moreover, like a local service economy in Boulder, such like education, healthcare, and the government, also indicates a trend to be more smart technology. These kind of demands from business make a solid base to start this project in Boulder.
So in addition to the two advantages that my colleague highlighted, Boulder also faces a couple of challenges. The first one is the state law that's on the books right now. The state law that you should see on the screen right now prohibits this kind of installation of community networks, and you do have two options with how to move forward to get around that law. You could take the fight to Denver and try and change the state law, but we believe that that would be a cumbersome, delayed battle. Instead, you have the option of having a city referendum on next year's ballot and just have the citizens vote to sort of circumvent this state restriction. The good news is that you have a very easy model to follow. Just north of us in Longmont, Colorado, in 2009, they attempted to pass a similar referendum that failed. Just last month, though, in fact, a month ago today, Longmont passed this referendum with 2/3 of voters voting in favor of $45 million in revenue bonds. And so during those 4 years, there were some lessons learned that we can take advantage of. The first lesson that Longmont learned from their experience was the importance of public awareness. The first time that they tried to pass the referendum, citizens didn't understand. And so there's three key points in moving forward with the public awareness campaign. First, we believe that like Longmont did, you should host a community forum, maybe through your public utility, that informs citizens just about the basics of fiber and why it's useful for the city. Next, as you get closer to the election day, it's important to draft and distribute promotional materials. And then finally, those promotional materials should assure voters that electric rates and taxes will not rise as an effect of this initiative. The second lesson from the Longmont model is that Longmont did not pay attention to the already established interest groups that are lined up on either side of this debate. Of course, on one side you have the entrenched telecommunications giants like Comcast that bring a lot of financial and monetary resources to this kind of debate. But on the other side, you do have some smaller but enthusiastic and high-quality interest groups, such as the New Rules Project, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and the Rural Broadband Association, that are eager to provide resources, or at least a sounding board, as you move forward with this initiative.
The second challenge that the city is facing is the lack of its own utility operator. You actually need a legal and physical entity that would own and operate the network, and Boulder doesn't have it. Luckily, for the last 3 years, Boulder community has been working on this initiative of taking the private energy utility provider, Xcel, into the public domain. This process is called municipalization. We've had 2 city referendums that supported the initiative, and in 2014, it looks like we are likely to get the regulatory and legal approvals to proceed. This process of municipalization taught us 2 lessons. First of all is public support is key. Public is much more supportive of the new and very substantive initiatives if it is aware of the cost, the benefits, and the risks involved. The ballot support increased from 51% to 68% between the 2 referendums as the city did its research and took efforts to educate the public. The second lesson is similar to Longmont. The incumbent operators will fight back. They have large budgets and they don't want to lose business. And they're willing to take the fight in all fields possible, which is political fields, PR with the citizens, as well as courts. And despite these challenges, the bottom line is that the Boulder should continue to engage with the public and proceed with fighting back the resistance from Xcel.
So let's talk about how to overcome these 2 challenges. We recommend a 2-pronged approach. The first prong of that approach is to target and pass the referendum by this time next year. And to do this, we recommend that you use lessons learned from the Longmont example. And that is first to conduct a community forum in February of 2014, and then later that year start canvassing and spreading promotional materials in September and continue to mobilize support so you can go ahead and win the election in November. After you win the election, conduct a feasibility study starting around April of 2015. Review the results of the study in the winter of 2015, and then start moving forward in the spring of 2016 with plans to go ahead and build out the network. The second prong of this strategy is to coordinate with the municipalization process of Excel. As you take Excel public, start working with Excel for plans on how to build out and operate a community-owned fiber optic network. Don't wait for the referendum to pass or for Excel to become public. There's steps Boulder can now take to start building the network. Step one would be changing the building code to require developers to install fiber conduit when they dig up the streets. This is a similar requirement that's already on the books that require developers to upgrade sewer and gas lines when they install a new apartment building or any other new development. The second step that you can take now is include fiber optic upgrades in the capital budget starting in 2014 going forward. For example, when the city needs to install a new sewer line, go ahead and budget to run conduit fiber. This will allow you to start building out the network incrementally. Similarly, budget and lay fiber to government and public buildings such as schools and city halls. This is another way you can start incrementally building the network and taking advantages of having a community-owned fiber network now. Lastly, incorporate and upgrade Excel's existing power grid to a smart grid by installing the necessary fiber. So as Excel becomes public and you start taking on ownership of the existing infrastructure, you can start upgrading that infrastructure to a smart infrastructure, which means it will be wired on the network. Building a community-owned network is risky. One of the primary risks that we identify in our strategy is the Excel going public and the referendum. Taking Excel public, there's a lot of uncertainty in doing this. The timing's uncertain, plus it's a very complex process. There hasn't been very many examples of a utility going public. So this is something that we're confident that you can do, but obviously there's going to be some snags that we're not we don't know right now. The second is the referendum didn't pass in Longmont the first time. And anytime you put anything on the ballot, there's always some uncertainty there. We think we have the winning strategy and that it'll work, but there's always some risk. The second is local support. Networks that have failed have lost support from the public. For example, in Utopia, Utah, they built a network, but it lagged expectations and now are contemplating its future. They're trying to find a buyer. They're not sure if they'll sell it or they'll shut it down. More than likely, though, they'll get stuck with about $30 million in debt. The third risk that you have to consider is, will you have the necessary entrepreneurial spirit to move forward? Like in Utopia, Utah, situations change and community-owned networks are risky. For example, in Burlington, Vermont, they built out the majority of the network, but over time the operating environments changed and they did not adapt quickly enough, and they lost the stomach to continue the process. They didn't have the necessary appetite for risk. So they're facing a similar dilemma of, are they going to shut it down or are they going to sell it off, and likely they will also be stuck with a lot of debt. However, we do see success in Danville, Virginia, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Lafayette, Louisiana, who are all examples of cities and communities that have built successful fiber optic networks. Lastly, operating a network is challenging. The city needs to hire the right people, first and foremost. And many of the issues in local support stem from challenges both from Burlington, Vermont, and Utopia, Utah, in operating their networks. For example, it's difficult to get the price right when you're competing with a natural monopoly and you break it up and you bring another competitor in there. And it can take some time to determine what that price will be and how you're going to optimize your services to get the revenues that you're expecting. And the second challenge of operations is when you're trying to market your product when your competitor can outspend you 10 to 1. That's really difficult. Those were issues that both Burlington, Vermont, and Utopia, Utah faced, and they didn't plan ahead enough. And that's something that we recommend as you move forward that you keep in mind. Boulder has the right strategy to mobilize business and public support to take Excel public and to pass a referendum that will allow it to build a community-owned broadband network. To do this, pass the referendum, take Excel public, and take steps to have the city start building the fiber optic network now. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Ma'am.
So the Small Business Administration and the USDA have different initiatives to increase broadband for small businesses, as well as allowing small businesses to be a part of the fiber optic network and also free broadband. Have you considered possibly partnering with them in the future?
We have not. This is the key interest groups that we've identified is the ones that Jeff mentioned, which is the Institute for Self-Reliance and what was the other one?
The New Rules Project.
New Rules Project. So this is the interest group that have basically going out and sending out teams to the communities that are contemplating or working on getting the networks and advising and consulting them how to navigate the seas. But we're not aware of the small business program and its incentives. It looks like the incentives are for the business to get the network, while the project for us is to solve the supply side of the equation. Daniel?
Yes. With regards to AK, with municipalization, do you not run the risk of imposing higher rates on consumers, given and taking away the advantages associated with an investment on utility, and also given the fact that you're making these investments in new technology that may be
Okay. That's a good question. Actually, during the first referendum that allowed the city to proceed with the municipalization, one of the requirements that the voters and citizens of Boulder made upon the city is that the rates by the new municipality should be comparable to that would have been offered by Excel. And the feasibility study that have been done the following 2 years, actually by independent studies, have confirmed that the city is able to meet that goal.
And if I can direct your attention to the screen, you'll see that in most of the case studies we looked at, prices did fall. And in the one instance where prices did rise, it was because speeds rose dramatically in Chattanooga. Sir.
You mentioned the other towns where this was not successful. What probability do you give to it succeeding in our town?
So we think it will succeed. I think the kind of what we foresee as our worst case scenario, and what's happened in other towns like Burlington and Utopia, they had a network built out. They've overbuilt and have this amazing network, and the issue is more on the operations side. So the worst case scenario is that you have this amazing backbone that you're now looking to get a private operator to come in and operate for you. And we decided not to recommend going after that approach the first time, because in both the three cases that we pointed out successes, Danville, Chattanooga, and Lafayette, they tried to do that the first time and a private operator wasn't interested. And I'll also point you to Provo, Utah, that also built out a community-owned network, and that's where Google decided to do their fourth Google Fiber initiative after, I think, Austin and Kansas City.
So I'm not familiar with Chattanooga or Lafayette, but Danville's fiber optic municipal network was essentially built off of the money provided through tobacco lawsuits, and it was basically capitalized by a very unusual source of funding. And I'm wondering how Boulder plans to capitalize their project given lack of a unique set of funding.
That's a typical question. One of the main challenges for a municipality that's owned by the public is funding. And there are thousands of municipalities across the nation that basically fund themselves through muni bonds. And that's a typical structure for investment-like projects, which are low risk in terms of the cash flows that take time and repay the bonds. And that's the plan, and that's most of the communities across the nation. That's how they have been financing the broadband network. Yes. So,
For such technology already exists this national industry, so these kinds of contracts would be owning these zones where actually you can use routers for the internet. So did you think of any contract or negotiation between these monopolies where they could actually keep it, but they give you the right to take your zoning so that you won't have much of they won't have to.
yeah. Well, the way the industry sort of works is if you build a network, you're allowed to build a network, you don't have to share it. So what happens is there are actually 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 parallel networks that exist next to each other. And and they don't share it. The model that most communities take is they build this new fiber network, which is actually you have to lay out new fiber in the ground and then open it for other existing or new operators to share. And this way, this actually serves the interest of the public rather than the utility itself, which is just interested in maximizing the profits. The great thing about the municipally owned fiber network is you caring about the consumer, the choices, and the prices that they pay, as well as just covering the cost for your network.
Okay, good luck. Thank you, Bruce. Any wrap-up comments before I leave? Well, first of all,